Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Schubert, and I'm the Tutoring Services Associate at Bespoke Education. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us this evening. I'm really excited for today's webinar, which is about the college essays. The college essays can be very daunting for a lot of students, but it's also a really cool and unique opportunity for admissions officers to hear a student's true voice. I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a moment. Sam and Gary are with us this evening, and they are so experienced and so great at what they do. They're both college essay specialists and have been doing this for a long time, have a lot of strategies, tips, and wisdom to share with us. But first, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Bespoke Education to give you a sense of who we are and what we do. And now we're going to share our screen. We are Bespoke Education. We are a full-service, one-stop shop educational services company based in New York City. We have physical offices on the Upper East Side, on the Upper West Side, and in Bronxville, New York, as well as in Paris, can't forget. But in today's era of virtual learning, we are able to work with students throughout the world. And we are able to offer a full slate of personalized academic services for any child's educational journey. So what do we do? Well, first of all, we do tutoring. We've been doing this for over 20 years, and we've been trying to refine our understanding of what makes good tutoring. Specifically, how can we best support our tutors to be the best in the world at what they do, and how can we best work with our students and support them? We work with students of all ages, starting in about kindergarten, going all the way up to the graduate level, and our tutors are able to meet with students both in person and online. We also do college admissions counseling. If you're here at this webinar tonight, you might be interested in this because you're at that stage of the process. We have a number of really terrific, really experienced college admissions counselors who have experience working in admissions offices, who have been college admissions counselors at high schools, and they do have a good sense of what schools are looking for, what schools are right for certain students. They're able to help with every stage of the process, whether it's creating a list of schools, writing those college essays, which we'll be talking about tonight, or just talking about schools, talking about your interests and finding programs that would be a good fit for a student. We also offer a subscription-based academic coaching service. Through this is a monthly subscription program where students are paired with an academic coach who helps them develop organizational skills and executive function skills. Bespoke Changemakers is a new program that we're really excited about. Through this program, students work with business leaders and entrepreneurs to develop programs that bring about social impact and change. And for all of these things I'm talking about, you can find more information on our website. Webinars, that's why we're all here today. So we've actually been hosting these free webinars for about 2 years right now, and they're centered on a variety of topics. If you go to our website, you'll kind of find the full catalog of webinars that we've offered in the past. You can even view them at your convenience via the YouTube link. And on our website, there's also a subscription list. You're welcome to put in your email address and you'll be informed of any webinars we'll be hosting in the future. We also offer a number of classes. We just recently released our summer 2022 course catalog, where you'll find classes on test prep, organization, college admissions, the college essay workshop. In fact, one of our amazing college essay specialists, Sam, will be running that workshop. So if you like Sam and if you like what you hear, feel free to sign up for her class. And then on our website, you'll find the other classes we're offering this summer too, such as high school entrance test prep, college admissions test prep, lots of math, science, lots of different topics. Bespoke Access. Unlike other tutoring companies, we place a heavy emphasis on pro bono work. Access and equity is really at the heart of our mission, and through our partnerships with private schools, charter schools, and public schools, we're able to offer free and low-cost tutoring to students in need. We're really excited to keep growing this facet of the company. And last and certainly not least, we know test prep. We actually started out as a test prep company, helping students with test preparation, and we still do a lot of it. Our tutors and our client service associates have 20 years of guiding students and families through these tests, whether it's the high school entrance tests, such as the IC, SSAT, SHSAT, college entrance tests, such as the SAT and ACT, or other tests that may come up in your student's journey, such as AP exams, regents, the full suite of graduate admissions exams. Whatever the test is, we definitely have tutors who know it. We have client services associates who are really experienced in just talking about these tests. So with that being said, please feel free to reach out to us. We have posted our contact information in the chat. You can also visit our website to find our phone number as well as our contact form, which you're welcome to fill out and someone will be in touch with you very soon. If something here interests you, or if you don't know what type of support you need, please give us a call. These initial calls are free of charge. We'll answer any questions you may have, or we'll connect you with a tutor. We'll set you up for a class or a mock test. Whatever you need, we're happy to help. We've been doing this for a long time, and we're more than happy to share the benefits of our knowledge and expertise with you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists, Sam Segan and Gary Jaffe. Sam and Gary both wear a lot of hats at Bespoke. They are test prep experts, they are subject tutors, they're college essay specialists, and they both have administrative roles in the company. So they're very busy, but they are amazing. And Sam and Gary, could you briefly introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you're doing with students these days? Sam can go first.
Amazing. Okay, so I am Sam Segan, and I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. I have been working with Bespoke for about 7 years, and prior to that, I worked as a tutor and college admissions counselor as well, with private clients. And prior to that, and probably more relevant to today, I worked briefly in the admissions office at Williams College, where I also went to school, majoring in philosophy and English with a focus on creative writing. So I love writing. I love finding people's values and their ways of expressing themselves. And I'm really excited to talk about the ways that we do that.
Very good. Thank you, Sam. And Gary, it's your turn.
Hi, I'm Gary Jaffe. I am a tutor and tutor manager here at Bespoke. I've been with Bespoke for 8 years, and I was tutoring before then in Austin, Texas, where I'm from, for about 3 years before then. In addition to being a tutor, I'm also a writer and director for film and theater. And I think that's relevant to our work as college essay guides, because the journey that the student is going on is very similar to the classic hero's journey. So you're going to hear a lot about that. And I really like my students to think of themselves as the hero or heroine of their own Star Wars movie. And that's really how we are going about this whole journey together. And of course, like Sam said, it is just the most rewarding thing to see students discover what it is they value and how to translate that value into language. Sam and I also both teach all the other tutors at Bespoke how to teach these tests, which means that the method, tests, we also do that, how to teach these essays, which means that the methods that Sam and I are going to speak about tonight are methods you're going to see across the company throughout all of the work of our fantastic tutors. And, Sam and I just have a really good time doing these webinars and talking about college essays, which are just the best, coolest, and in some ways most moving part of the college admissions prep process. With that in mind, I think that we have a poll to find out a little bit more about you. So let's get that poll running. We're going to find out who is in the audience tonight.
Where are they in their journey?
Yeah, and Gary, I love that analogy of the Star Wars. I'm going to start using that when I talk to people about this.
Unfortunately, it means that Sam and I are Obi-Wan Kenobi, which means that we have to disappear into the Force by the end. But honestly, I think that's pretty appropriate because ultimately it's not our task, it is the student's task. And we, as classic archetypical mentors, must die by the end.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Metaphorically speaking. We are on our own journeys in our own pursuits.
Gary, thanks for introducing the poll, and thank you to everyone who's completed that poll. It does help us direct our messaging towards who's in attendance tonight, so we appreciate that. And then just have a few other logistical items before I go off screen. So first is We will be recording this webinar, so anyone that's in attendance will receive a link, which means you don't have to pause or write things down or stop your screen. You'll be able to review this at your convenience, and you can share with anyone that you think may find it relevant. We love for this to be as much of a live discussion as possible, so please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. However, we'd love if you use the Q&A because that means other attendees can see your question and we can make it more of a discussion, and they may have the same question. You can post anonymously if you'd wish. And finally, we are a word of mouth company. So if you like what you hear today, feel free to share that link with anyone that may also benefit from it. Feel free to give us a call. And again, thanks so much for being here. And Gary and Sam, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Well, Sam, here we are again.
Here we are, where we're waiting for our, oh, there we are.
Go. So we are going to address several key questions as we examine the college admissions essay today. And I'll start by running through briefly what those questions are. We're going to talk about what is the college admissions essay? And as a part of that, we're going to talk about what it's not. We are going to go in depth at what makes a good college essay. Now, this is not an objective measure. Like you take the SAT or the ACT, you get a score. However, Sam and I have really tried and true practices and approaches to these tests that have seen admission to some of the best schools in the country: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, Cornell, etc. So when we talk about what we think is a good college admissions essay, that is based on, practical experience. And of course, Sam was on the other side of the table, so she knows quite well what moved her when she was in admissions herself. We're going to talk about the timeline, which is, and it's great that you're thinking about the timeline now because it is only April and you have plenty of time to figure out your timeline. We'll address the supplements that accompany the main college admissions essay. And we're even going to talk a little bit about you and the roles that you can expect to play over the course of this process. Throughout all of this, we're going to give you tidbits and insights into how we as Bespoke tutors work so that you can feel confident about working with us. So, Sam, what is the college admissions essay? Tell me about it.
I'm so glad you asked. The college admissions essay, as we usually refer to it, is the Common App essay. So if you've heard of the Common App, which I'm sure most of you parents of 11th graders or 11th graders have, that's the application you can use for the vast majority of colleges to which you'll be applying. It's 650 words, which is pretty short. It's like a little less than 2 pages on most Word documents. It's a personal statement, meaning it's the story of you or the essay of you, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a little bit of a distinction there. Later, we'll discuss the difference between the classical hero's journey that Gary loves so much and something that's a little bit more of a think piece, more of an analytic essay that we like to, as we like to call it. Notice that there are some schools that are outside of the Common App system, but pretty much every school will still require some version of this base essay. So you'll be able to repurpose the same thing for multiple schools, regardless of whether they take the Common App. And you can use the same essay for pretty much every school that you'll be applying to. Of course, some ask for more, which is why, again, it's good that we're starting early because you'll be able, again, to reuse some of the scraps of your early scratch work, your early first drafts, in other essays, in supplements, and so forth. And the most important thing about this essay, and the one thing I will say from the admission side is, we have absolutely rejected students on the basis of their essay. That's something that happens. I wouldn't say it's something that happens often, but if you have a really, really stellar set of scores and a college essay that speaks to a person who doesn't know themselves, a person who is maybe projecting morals that are not correct or appropriate, those are things that give admissions offices pause. Luckily, it's easy to avoid and it's easy to write a good essay. Well, as easy as you want to make it, I guess, and we'll get to that. But this is a chance really for colleges to see who you are in a way that goes beyond the quantifiable and to express what Well, what does the college essay express? Gary, what would you say? How could we define that?
I think it's who you are at your core. And to that end, we can talk about what it is not. It is not a typical school essay. For a very long time now, the students in the room, or if you're a parent, your students, have practiced writing what we'll call the typical school essay, an introduction, a thesis, a couple body paragraphs, and a conclusion. That is not this essay. This is not an argumentative essay. It does not require research in the library. It requires research of the self. And what we mean by that is this essay, while it will have a point to make about who you are, what your priorities are, what your values are, it's going to be structured a little bit differently, a little bit more like a New Yorker think piece or an Atlantic personal reflection, something like that. Something that perhaps has a little bit more in common with a story. It's also not a resume. They already do know your accomplishments, partially because there's a part in the Common App where you input them, and because you can literally submit a resume. In fact, not only can you submit a resume, but you can attend the resume building webinar that Sam leads, which is very helpful. But this is not just an opportunity for you to laundry list your accomplishments. It is perhaps an opportunity for you to give depth and meaning to one of them, to tell us the human story behind something that you are proud of or something that you struggled with. You can and should brag a little, like it's okay to acknowledge when something you've done is impressive or you're proud of, but we want to know, hey, what went into that? What did you have to do and discover in yourself in order to get to that accomplishment? Or maybe it's not an accomplishment at all. Maybe it's a failure that taught you an important lesson. There's a wide range of possibilities here because ultimately the college essay is the story of how you are becoming the you that you will be. It's the story of a young person becoming an adult. And it's the story of your taking on a little bit bigger of a picture of the world and your place in it. So with that in mind, let us take a look at what the college essays literally are asking you to answer. Wow, so many words.
So many words. This is, by the way, this is what you'll see, and we'll drop a link in the chat. This is what you'll see if you actually go to the Common App webpage. These prompts change very little year from year. They actually haven't changed at all this year. They're exactly the same as they were last college cycle, which is exciting because you can see essays that have been written on every single one of these topics. And these are the 6 topics and 1 wild card that you'll always see on the Common App. The first one asks about an identity, interest, or talent. So something that's central to who you are. Notice on the topic of failure, and believe it or not, this is actually my favorite both to work with students on and to read. The second one is about a challenge, setback, or failure. My cousin wrote about the time he didn't make the tennis team and he got into U Chicago. So there you go. And next is a time when you challenged a belief or idea. By the way, this can be yours or someone else's. I like this one. It's a very thinky one. And 4, this sort of came into play during the pandemic. This is a newer question, which is to reflect on something that someone has done for you. Number 5 asks you to discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of growth. And again, growth is a topic we're going to come back to pretty often because, as Gary has said so aptly, this essay is not about you as a finished product. It's about you as a growing human being. I don't think anyone can say identity is fixed, right? We don't believe in that. And we actually do have a whole webinar also on the growth mindset, I think. But anyway, the last one is describing a topic, idea, or concept that you find deeply engaging. It's probably pretty reasonable to expect colleges to be interested in that from you, right? That's you as a learner. So notice that all of these are avenues into discussing facets of yourself. Number 7, believe it or not, I would kind of recommend against this because it's a little unstructured. So unless you're feeling really bold and you just want to write an essay about literally anything, I would shy away from this and pick one of the others that's more structured. But the last option is, of course, you can write anything you want to write that you think would convince a college to accept you.
And I
But
think that the fact that they put a 7 in there basically indicates that these are prompts. They are not, you know, assignments.
Right.
That ultimately they want you to write the essay that best expresses who you are, and chances are it's going to fit into 1 through 6. But if it can't fit through 1 through 6, there is number 7 waiting there, ready to be used. But now,
Yeah, I like to tell students, sorry, we'll get to more in a second, but I do like to tell students, think of the essay that expresses you best, then see which prompt it fits. But Gary, you were about to continue, and I cut you off.
Yeah, so we bolded these couple words per line: identity, interest, talent, challenge, setback, failure, challenge, belief, idea, so on and so forth. Because ultimately, all of these bolded words are pointing to the question, who are you? And next slide, 3 central core questions. Who are you and what do you value? Who are you and why should colleges value you? Who are you and what is the essay only you can write? These 3 questions are fundamentally useful in guiding a student toward the topic and essay that will work the best for them in college admissions. Let's break these down a little. What do you value? Spoilers. What do you value is, what do you care about? You're applying to college. College is where people go to care about stuff. And if you want to go to a real competitive college, you better care a lot about something. You better care a lot about something in a really interesting way. So that's what do you value? What's important to you? Then, why should colleges value you? This is where the essay is a little bit of a pitch. Like, hey, I'm a college. I only have so many slots for people. You tell me why you should be here. Now, this doesn't mean that you should write, I deserve to be at Brown or, Hendrix or Northwestern because of X, Y, and Z reasons, but rather you're making a compelling case for why you would be a compelling presence at that university. This last question I love because it acts as a sieve for topics. What is the essay only you can write? I don't care who you are. You as an individual on this planet have a point of view about something that no one else has. And whether that's the an extraordinarily specific experience that you had in the pursuit of your passion, or if it's a thrilling juxtaposition of 2 different interests, like maybe we're going to talk later, it's pancakes and chemistry, or it's basketball and economics, or it's something where those 2 lines intersect, and at that intersection point is you and you alone. Write about the thing that is distinctly you. If you're working on a draft and you feel like, I think someone else could write this essay, change topics, or at least ask yourself, how do I get more specific? That is the core of what is the essay only you can write. But the essay does have to be good. So Sam, can you tell me about what makes a good essay?
We had some spoilers for that, I think, in your Civ question, because spoilers. I mean, they saw the slide already, but we already did see that it should be specific. And I think that's what we always pick a different one to start on. I'm going to start with being specific, because I think one of the things that makes any piece of writing good is how much it can make you feel with the person writing it. So something that will send me much more directly into the world of the student is a specific detail, like their own family's tradition of making pancakes every Saturday and the specific blend of baking powder and baking soda that they use. That takes me into the moment, that makes it feel real. And you know what they say about when something is, when you want to express honesty, if you can fake that, you've got it made. But you shouldn't fake it. You should instead.
You don't have to fake it. This is the great thing.
Exactly.
Is that I see that transition, Sam. You don't have to fake it. your essay can and should be genuine and honest. Our first bullet point here. A lot of students often feel like they have to, you know, inflate themselves to seem like these, you know, superhumans who, you know, saved the world and did calculus well too. And the simple reality is that admissions is going to be a little skeptical of like puffed up things. So the more that you can express something that was genuine and honest to your experience while also being authentic to your accomplishments, the better this will be. I know for myself, I wrote about, this is many years ago, I wrote about being in Texas and connecting with Tennessee Williams, the Glass Menagerie, in which Tom Wingfield, representing Tennessee Williams, dreams of leaving St. Louis. And I had a lot of feelings about like wanting to get out of Texas. But I also was a big theater maker, so I wrote about directing that play and my relationship with the actor who was playing the lead. We don't need to dig too into that much of that essay, but I think it's appropriate here because it was genuine and honest to my experience in an academic way, and then I'm ultimately talking about one of the masterpieces of American theater. So genuine and honest, it doesn't have to be saving the world. It can just be something that was important in an authentic way and specific way to you. What else was one of your favorites, Sam?
I mean, I have to say that I love the part where it talks about an openness to not knowing. And that's not only my philosophical side. I think that that's something we always have to consider the context. This is a college essay. This is an essay that you're writing that pitches you as a curious and open-minded college student. And so many students feel, and I think I mentioned this before, like they have to wrap things up in a nice, neat bow, or that they have to have learned every lesson there is to learn. But I think my favorite essays end on a note of deep curiosity about the world. Of this is what I've experienced, this is what I know about myself, and this is what I'm curious to learn more about.
You're going to college. College is the place to learn stuff. So any essay that sort of ends on, well, figured that one out, I'm like, kid, no, you didn't. Nor should you have. And I think at the core of that, and this is the last one we'll focus on, is growth. This is a word that we've come back to often, whether it's the growth of your thinking or the growth of yourself as someone who you know knows about the world. The essays will track some sort of development, but growth does not mean that you are done growing. So a good essay will end with the, you know, the growth to come, because that's going to happen at college. And that's going back to the why should colleges value you? Because you're already on a growth path and you're going to keep growing at whatever university you are applying to. So those are some thoughts about what makes good essays. But what makes a good topic? We've been
very big picture here. I think it's time for some specifics. Don't you?
I do. Okay, so these are our winning topics here, all real topics from real essays that got real students into real colleges. Let's see what we got here. Making pancakes, that, write a college essay about that? A student government election. Sam, that was yours. They won that election, right?
As that leading question may imply, that student lost the election, but his loss of the election sparked what I thought was a really touching reflection on his status as his attempt to be, I think, the second Black student president of his school, and what that meant to him, and what the failure to attain that meant to him. And then, of course, we also have some really interesting topics that I think are interesting because of the perspective that they came from. Like one of yours, Gary, was osteopathic medicine. So of course, that was a student who was just obsessed with medical school and was on the med school track and had no other interests, right?
She wasn't. She was a dancer. I'm liking the setups here. I'm enjoying this. You have to understand that we do have these conversations a lot. And not only that, but we've read each other's essays. This is something that we do at Bespoke, is with the students' permission, we will share the essays amongst ourselves to give more objective feedback. So when we have this kind of personal understanding of each other's essays, we really do. This is quite genuine. Anyway, yes, the student was not on the med school track. She was a dancer. And she went on a journey, on a trip to a university, attended a class about osteopathic medicine, and had this like light bulb moment where suddenly her dance experience opened up the door to this holistic approach to medicine. And so her essay was quite beautiful at stitching those two things together. And when I talk about the intersection of interest that only you can write, I'm fairly sure that only this student could express such a specific connection between osteopathic medicine and dance. And that was a lovely essay that got her into her top school. Now, Sam, I brought up making pancakes. Tell me about that one, because that just doesn't seem academic at all. Give me a break.
I know, right? I mean, it's such a mundane, very specific, particular ritual that was just part of the fabric of the student's life. What could it possibly mean? No, that student was in AP chemistry and was in love with the chemistry of baking and also with the psychology behind how she approached even tasks as mundane as making pancakes. So the essay, while framed by the pancake dropping onto the skillet and the pancake coming off the skillet, wound up being about a lot more. It wound up being about her approach to chemistry. It wound up being about the chemistry she saw in everyday life. And it wound up being about themes that went beyond just the surface topic, which I think brings us to the next slide.
Absolutely.
The next slide. Which was the message, what she learned from both her AP chemistry class and the process of pancake making. We've all heard, right, that sort of adage about the first pancake, it's never perfect, was about overcoming perfectionism. So of course, while these seem perhaps mundane on their surface, summer camp, a ballet teacher, basketball, they were about much, much more. And that's a sort of a universal.
What that really goes to show is that the topic is a creative and clever entry point to talk about the rich, deep thing. And as you can see from all of these, the thing below it is substantial and is something about the human experience, something about growth, something about all those things that we said go into a good essay. And I do want to point out that we have some failures here, but we also have some wins. But what's interesting is that the wins are not necessarily the main point of the essay. So in the essay about the ballet teacher, this is another one of mine. I don't know why. I've had several dancers. This is a student who is a dancer and also a very accomplished student. And she danced at the White House for Michelle Obama. And that does get mentioned, it gets tapped, but it's not the essay about how she danced at the White House for Michelle Obama. No, it's about how her mentor wanted her to follow a path that was purely ballet. And my student wanted to pursue something else, namely going to college and having a rich academic experience. Would suffice to say, she wrote an essay about finding a way to honor the legacy of her mentor, who's very important to her, while also carving her own path. And boop, hit the White House on the way. A spectacular essay known to move Bespoke tutors to tears. It's quite beautiful. Great, so this is about how topics have a deeper message behind them, and all of those things behind them lead to values. So Sam, tell me about some of the values we're really seeing here.
So on to the next slide. One of the things that I talk about often in my classes is really what we're asking, and really even behind the messages, behind the questions that the Common App asks is, what are your values and what are your core beliefs? You can find lists of values and core beliefs just by Googling those words, by the way, if that's something that helps you brainstorm. And we go both ways, right? There are some students who just don't want to think this abstractly right away. They'd rather think of the topic and then figure out what value it signifies. And then there are other students who enjoy getting in touch with their values, with their beliefs, and then thinking of ways that that's expressed in their lives. And I've worked with students who go in both directions or who kind of ping pong back and forth. And they say, wow, well, I think of myself as a person with a great deal of self-knowledge. And then we'll think, well, where does that show up in your life? And interestingly, this past year, I had one first-gen college student who found that that played out with puzzles, which I loved. And her way of putting together puzzles was super unique. But yeah, this is what colleges will actually be reading for when they read your essays. They will be reading for what your values are. And yeah, so
Now, we often say that there are no bad topics, right? Almost.
almost no bad topics. Actually, that's a good segue into what we do want to avoid, because while we do want to see positive values expressed, there are some things that you may wish to move away from.
Great. So on the next slide, we'll see a few topics to avoid. I was about to say, unless you have a really, really, really good reason, but honestly, just avoid them. The first is the classic, what I learned on my trip abroad. It is very hard to write the essay only you can write on this topic because many, 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 many people have an experience of going abroad and having their horizons expanded. It's sort of the nature of going abroad. And then add to that, that it's very easy to trip into sort of complex systems of privilege in this essay. So really, unless there's an extremely specific thing that is probably a different topic that happened on the trip abroad, I try to avoid these. This next one we call the 4Ds: depression, divorce, death, and disease. Now, while acknowledging that in terms of human narratives and growth, these 4 are extraordinarily important chapters of people's lives and that they do define who people become, we argue that these topics are insufficiently academic to truly set up a conversation about the kind of student that a person is going to be at a particular college. I often say for these 4 that I can't wait to hear the song, read the poem, watch the movie, go to the play, whatever it is that the writer has in them creatively to express about these 4 things. But alas, they should stay away from college essays. This last one, unfortunate implications, this just means get someone to read your essay to make sure that there's not something that you're missing about yourself. That is something that Sam and I and the other tutors at Bespoke can play for you, is that sometimes students think that they have a really great idea, but maybe it's focusing more on the student's brother than on their own experience. Or maybe it's a little iffy on a delicate subject matter. This is why it's good to have a tutor, a guidance counselor, anyone to just give that reaction. Rip off the Band-Aid. It's not a judgment. We've all written things that we didn't realize had a certain implication, and that's okay. So with that in mind, we've alluded throughout the webinar about 2 different types of essays: the narrative essay and the analytic essay. The narrative essay is going to be the traditional hero's journey that I've been talking about, and the analytic essay is more a journey of thought. Sam and I are now going to break down these 2 essays, including sort of some structural aspects that you would expect to see in one of those essays. We want to be very clear that neither essay is better than the other. This is just different ways for the students to approach writing these essays, because the student's brain is going to lead them toward a certain mode of expression, and we want to make sure that you know how to handle both types. So
right, yeah. Before you begin, I just want to quickly note that if you want to see examples of essays, and after we explain these 2 structures, if you want to learn how to categorize these essays, we will be dropping a link in the chat to some sample essays called the Johns Hopkins Essays That Worked that you can find online, and that'll maybe concretize some of this a little bit.
John, we're really lucky. Johns Hopkins, the university, every year posts a great selection of essays that literally were written by students, got them into Johns Hopkins, and you can learn a lot structurally, content-wise, etc., from reading those essays. All right, let the journey begin now. Narrative essays, like Star Wars movies, or at least the good ones, Like most stories, since humans began telling stories, a narrative essay is going to feature a protagonist with a want, desire, or a need. This want, desire, or need will lead them to obstacles and conflicts in their pursuit of that desire. Those obstacles will often create such a wall that the protagonist will arrive at the all is lost or dark night of the soul, wherein it feels like they should never have gone on the journey to begin with, or more important for our purposes, the protagonist has to sit down and, to quote the Rolling Stones, figure out that you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need, which is to say that they assess deep within about what they truly value. Throughout this entire process, the protagonist is making choices. I love focusing on choices for narrative essays because a choice reveals something about the writer, something about their values. And especially if you are tracking a journey, a growth from one place to another, the choices you make at the beginning of an essay will be different from the choices that you make towards the end. And that will reveal who you are. The next slide has a visualization of this hero's journey, which is very concise and applicable for college essays. We are sending out a recording of this afterward, but if you want to take a screenshot of this right now, I don't mind that. Here, we'll pose. Joking. So let's take a look at the bottom left. Want, desire, need. There it is. Up the protagonist goes. They think this is going to be easy. Everything is going well. You get a false sense of security. And then wham, we hit those obstacles. Arg, as the diagram shows, which sends us plunging to this all is lost, dark night of the soul, where you have to sit and think and really process, what do I really need here? What can I let go of? That provokes a transformation. You choose to try again in a new way, which leads to the true victory and true self-knowledge. And again, as we've alluded to, the true victory and true self-knowledge is not figuring everything out. It is perhaps figuring out a little bit of something bigger. A lot of times when students have written a narrative style essay, the part that they're missing is the all is lost. We were running an exercise with tutors at Bespoke. This was back in the in-person days. We were at the office all together, and we all read this essay, and we all collectively said, I think there's a paragraph missing. And sure enough, it was the paragraph between conflict and true self-knowledge, wherein the protagonist, the writer, needed to go, I don't know. I am lost. And that is where the good stuff is. But speaking of going, Sam, tell us about the analytic essay, A Journey of Thought.
Yes, so I think it's so apt that you were just talking about that which we do not know, because as Socrates said, true wisdom is knowledge of our own ignorance. I mean, we don't really know what Socrates said. Yes.
Sam wrote her college essay way back when on her relationship to Socrates. So if you didn't already know that she was a philosopher from a young age, there it is. The proof is in the pudding. Back to you.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, I was the gadfly of my high school. So the analytic essay is for those who may perhaps be daunted by the idea of becoming creative writers, if that's not something that is natural to them or not something that they're comfortable with. Like they're a STEM student. They don't want to suddenly write a story. That can feel a little intimidating. Or they're simply deep thinkers and they want to discuss something that's meaningful to them. They want to show us the movement of their mind. So this is something that I think suits two of the prompts very well. In other words, you're going to usually get an analytic essay when you're writing about prompts 5 and 6, discussing a realization that sparks a new understanding or describing a topic or concept that you find especially engaging. Now, there are some commonalities, and I do love Gary's narrative structure. I actually use it in the college essay writing class that I take. I have a lot of students like map their essay onto that little, squiggle line. So I do love that. But I also really like the analytic essay, which has really, it's kind of more of a sandwich. And it does begin with a little bit of a story, like a little bit of an anecdote. One of my students began on the basketball court. He was using economic theory to choose whether or not to coach or continue competing in basketball. And then in this, the meat of the sand, which is kind of like your classic academic essay, where you teach us about a topic, interweaving it with moments from your life. And then finally, you arrive at a conclusion. That conclusion often loops around and brings us back to the same scene that began at the beginning. So I think one of Gary's students was writing about basketball also. Is that right, Gary?
Yes, which will actually be, there was a question in the chat about how to write about sports stories. So I'm glad we're bringing up these basketball examples, because that'll lead directly into something I'll talk about after you finish.
Yeah, no. I saw that and the answer is, if you're just writing the straightforward narrative about the sport, that's less good. Let's say less good. But if you're able to fold it into something more meaningful, like Gary wrote about using an algorithm to program a jump shot. Gary's student wrote that. And my student wrote about using economic theory to make a decision around sports. So would it be fair to say that if sports aren't the main focus, that's something that you should do, if you're able to weave something in that elevates it from being just the standard sports story, the story that only you could tell, in other words?
Yeah, so I think you could think of sports as the vehicle by which to deliver a deeper message, whether it's a thought piece, an analytic essay here, or you know what, now that I'm saying this out loud, I think one might want to avoid sports in the more traditional narrative essay front, but if the sport is intersecting analytically with something, whether it's like we're saying here, so the basketball story that what my student wrote, it's framed by a layup, and first he begins thinking about how he would write a program, an algorithm, to make the layup happen. Ultimately realizes that human behavior is never going to, be succinctly confronted by an algorithm, so that machine learning, which is the thing he's really interested in, is actually where it has to go. So all within this layup, you get this journey from algorithm to machine learning to thinking about all the things he doesn't really know how to do yet as a programmer. But then at the end of the essay, he still has to get the layup. I have to just tell you that he brought a draft to me that literally had the programming in it.
Oh, I love that.
And I freaked. I thought that was so cool, because it's like, who else would have thought to just put in the program? It was so great. Anyway, suffice to say, an analytic essay will be framed often by a real thing and have a journey of thought within, where something is uncovered, discovered, changed, so on and so forth.
Which actually I think brings us to an important element of what we're going to talk about next, which is that good writing is often circular, meaning we start someplace and we return to the same place, but we have been changed by the journey. And I think that brings us to the next slide, which I think, yes, the next slide, which is about good writing. And
Right.
Indeed, yeah, especially I think with analytic essays, that full circle from the beginning to the end, beginning the layup, I thought it was a jump shot layup, to the end of the layup. I actually don't know the difference between those two because I'm not a basketball player. But yeah, that I have to say that's one of my favorites. Gary, what's one of your favorite elements of good writing?
This is funny to think about for an essay, but show don't tell is very important. What this means is, don't say, I'm passionate about programming. Stick a program in it. That is a great example of showing you are so passionate that you are going to literally write a basketball program and stick it into your essay. Similarly, in my essay, I didn't say, well, gosh, I'm really passionate about theater. I, spoke passionately about my relationship to a Tennessee Williams play, which meant that I was really cool in high school and was obviously very popular. So show don't tell, which is to say, show through the things that you write what your core values are. Mm-hmm. Sam, back to you. What's another one of your favorites?
Well, I think what I'm going to go with as our time, I think, is waning, is less is more. And I think this is particularly important in the editing phase. I have to say, and my students often think this is like a magic trick where they'll come in with like 1,000 words, and I'll say with perfect confidence that it will take no more than an hour to get it down to 650. And I just go through it and I'll ask them, why is this sentence here? Why is this sentence here? And usually they'll find that by cutting it down to just the specific and meaningful moments, turning points, images, they wind up with a better essay. And often that's also a good reminder to us that in the early stages you should not cut, you should write abundantly. The cutting comes later.
It is funny, students like they think it's, oh my God, my essay is 1,000 words. How will it ever be 650? I'm like, kid, it's easy. Just stick with that. Like that's the easy part. The hard part is getting the good 1,000 words.
Right.
The last thing that I think we should emphasize here is that it really should sound like the student. This is a message to all the parents who are tempted to rewrite the students' work because they think it sounds a little too young. They're students. They are kids. They should use as mature of vocabulary as they would use ordinarily in their writing. And it's okay if it's a little rough around the edges. I think, Sam, you worked for admissions. You had a strong sense for when an essay was doctored or not.
Yeah, it's definitely something we would keep an eye out for. And it was a mark against the student. If it were too polished, it's not even the vocabulary. It's sort of the polish, and it's the sense of remove in perspective from being the person who actually experienced it.
Right. The best essays that we've talked about today really, really, really have the student's voice. And that's because they were real students who wrote them. And because Sam and I and all the other great tutors at Bespoke really work on honoring the voice of the students. Because, it's not our job to write a Sam essay or a Gary essay. It's our job to facilitate the student to write their best essay. Speaking of facilitation, let's talk about how timelines works. How does this process get facilitated throughout?
Okay, so we have a lot of 11th graders. I saw that in the poll, and this is the perfect time for you to be seeing this webinar, which, I mean, honestly, that's why we schedule it for now, because right now is when you're going to be picking your colleges. It's when you're going to be visiting colleges, making up your list, hopefully taking notes while you're on tours of colleges, but that's a different story. And then you can begin brainstorming your main essays sometime in summer. Now, this is the most optimistic timeline that we have here, beginning in June, beginning with really open-ended free writing and selecting your topic, selecting which values you want to represent of yourself, generating a lot of extra words that you'll later use in supplements, which we're going to talk about very shortly. Outlining, because we do believe outlining has a place in the process, and it really facilitates and expedites how quickly you write. I have all of my students outline in our college essay class, and it's been very fruitful in helping them to organize the open-ended first draft. And then you draft a cleaner actual essay. Then notice we've saved a full 2 months for revision. This is very important, and for supplement writing. And then, of course, you submit. Notice we do, if we'll continue through the slides, have 2 compressed timeline suggestions, because I know some students are away at camp, which you may even write about in your essay, and they may not want to start until August, in which case we will need to compress that initial topic brainstorming. But we still want to leave really ample time for drafting and revision. And even if, worst case scenario, you can't start until September, as you can see on the next slide here, we have to do that topic selection very quickly. But again, I really want to note, sometimes students will come to me full of, ennui, full of fear, full of upset that they have selected a topic that isn't perfect. There is no perfect topic. If you can express yourself in that topic, that is the right topic for you. And yeah, as you can see here, we have ways to work with students who are dealing with any timeline. And we've been talking also, so Gary, go ahead.
So again, the benefit though of starting early is to really have that extensive brainstorming process, because even if you can get the one topic settled, you are going to have supplements to deal with. And so this is on the next slide. You'll see that supplements are an important part of the process. Many, many, many schools ask for them, and many schools ask for sort of eccentric topics. these essays are anywhere from 50 to 300, 400 words. But really, what we'll discover in that early brainstorming process are maybe the three broad points of the narrative the student wants to tell the school over the course of their admissions essay. Well, your main or admission application. Well, the main essay is going to get the most important one, but then the supplementals are going to come around and fill out that picture. So that's why that brainstorming process is super useful, because whether it's a whole concept or even just like one interesting thing that was discovered and put into the HQ Google Drive in early brainstorming, that's all going to migrate in. Plus, one of the benefits of working with a tutor is that we can help you see where certain essays are repetitive. Like, okay, this UVA essay is actually just this UMich essay with a couple words changed, or 100 words chopped off. So we can make the whole, oh my God, I'm applying to 15 schools, there are so many essays, process a lot smaller. The why here essay is perhaps the most time intensive. I say this because I always demand that my students do the research, which means talking to people who went to that school, reaching out to staff, digging deep into the website, the curriculum, etc., so that you can find a very specific thing that that school does uniquely that you can say, this is why I want to go to the school. More on that on a future moment when you're working with the tutor, but basically, at the very least, play defense. Don't say you want to go to UVA in your UMich essay. That just, it just doesn't, no good. In the interest of time, we're going to quickly take a look at the roles that you will see. The student, as we've emphasized over and over again, is the protagonist here. It is your journey, and the rest of us is your support team. This is important. It is not our essay, it is your essay. Parents, family, you may know the student very well, and you do, and that is extremely useful. And it is important to make sure that the story that you think the student should tell and the story the student wants to tell have their space, because the students will listen, they will, but the student must also have the space to chart their own journey. And that's also where a tutor comes in handy, because a tutor can hear all the sides and help unify that into one singular idea. But make no mistake.
I often hear, oh, I'm sorry. I have to say, I often tell parents who say, oh, my child will not listen to me about their essay, that this essay is in many ways your child's first step toward realizing themselves as an independent adult. It's their first movement toward literally living alone, living at college, living their adult life and defining themselves.
Absolutely. We got to keep
yes.
The guidance counselor is a great first reader, sort of like a mock of the admissions officer that is going to read. So the feedback we get from the guidance counseling team at your school is exceptionally useful. And that brings us to us, which is that we as tutors are your consultants, your intermediaries. We are inside the process working with you and the student on the essay. We are outside the process because we have seen a lot of these essays. So we know this journey really well. We know what good college essays look like. We help each other, respond to the essays. So you get with us an internal experience and an objective external experience, because it is a journey and we are your guides on that journey. And Sam, why don't you tell them about our upcoming webinar where they can see that journey right in front of their eyes?
Right. So this webinar has been more of like a meta view of what is the college essay and what is it about. But if you really want an eye into our tutoring process, we're going to do a college essay masterclass webinar in which we will play tutor and student, and we'll actually walk through blank page to complete college essay. You'll see all of our methods. You'll see some of the prompts that we ask our students, some of our brainstorming and editing process. We think it'll be really fun and really engaging. And yeah, you'll really get a window into how we work. So I hope that you can make it for that.
And ultimately, as tutors, we are here to lower the stakes and increase the fun and, of course, the productivity of this process. It really gives Sam and me and all the great tutors at Bespoke deep pleasure to work with students on their college essays, and we would be delighted to work with you. Sarah, take it away.
Sam and Gary, thank you so much. As always, that was incredible. I've watched this so many times and I feel like every time I watch it, I learn something new, and it's a little different. So that's great. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Once again, we are Bespoke Education. Please give us a call if you're interested in working with Sam or Gary or any of our other college essay specialists. We're happy to set you up with the right person. We'll talk to you first to get a sense of your student and their goals. Please check out Sam's essay class. It's on our website. It's going to be great. It's kind of like fun to do these things in a social interactive environment as well, if a student has a proclivity towards that. And yes, give us a call. Our contact information is in the chat. Thanks so much again for tuning in today. Look forward to staying in touch.